These are 1,009 counties in America's heartland, where fewer people live today than a century ago, even though the nation's population tripled in size. The Great Plains stretches east of the Rocky Mountains across 12 states, and it represents one of the most striking demographic puzzles in the United States. You could drive for hours across several 100,000 square miles and encounter fewer than 6 people per square mile. In many areas, you'd find fewer than 2 inhabitants per square mile. That's the same population density Frederick Jackson Turner used in 1893 to declare the American frontier officially closed. Here we are, over 130 years later, with vast swathes of the American interior that remain virtually empty. The numbers tell an incredible story. The Great Plains covers an enormous geographic area but contains less than 15% of the nation's population. We're talking about 45.5 million people spread across a region that dwarfs most countries. Over 71% of those people live in just 14% of the region's counties. That means 867 counties across the Great Plains house only 13 million residents. The New York metropolitan area alone has more people than the entire non-metropolitan Great Plains. We're looking at one of the most dramatic examples of population concentration anywhere in the developed world. What happened here? How did such a massive chunk of America become so sparsely populated? And why do so few Americans choose to call this region home? The story begins with a tale of 2 timelines. Between 1870 and 1920, the Great Plains experienced steady population growth as settlers moved west during the Great Expansion era. Towns sprouted up along railroad lines, farming communities took root, and the region buzzed with the energy of a growing frontier. Many counties reached their peak populations during this golden age of settlement. Then something fundamental shifted. Starting in the 1920s and accelerating through the 1930s, the region's rural population began a decline that continues to this day. The rural plains have lost 1/3 of their population since 1920. While America's overall population was booming through the 20th century, these rural communities were steadily emptying out. The transformation wasn't gradual, it was dramatic. Between 1950 and 2000, the region added 21 million new residents. That sounds impressive until you realize where those people actually went. Metropolitan counties expanded by 182% and absorbed 92% of all that growth. Meanwhile, the 358 rural counties in the region actually lost over 500,000 people during the same period. Nearly 8 out of 10 counties in the Great Plains experienced minimal growth or outright decline during the latter half of the 20th century. Almost all the aggregate population growth concentrated in less than 21% of the region's counties. We're seeing the creation of population islands in an ocean of increasingly empty land. The forces driving this concentration are both economic and social. Agriculture, once the backbone of Great Plains communities, underwent a massive transformation. Mechanization meant farms needed fewer workers. Consolidation created fewer but larger farming operations. Young people found themselves with limited local opportunities and began migrating to cities for education and employment. Agriculture alone doesn't explain the full picture. The Great Plains faced a perfect storm of challenges that made urban areas increasingly attractive compared to rural communities. Small towns struggled to maintain basic services as their tax bases eroded. Schools consolidated or closed entirely. Hospitals and clinics became harder to access. Main street businesses shuttered as residents drove to larger towns or shopped online. The population density itself created a vicious cycle. When you have fewer than 6 people per square mile, and in many areas fewer than 2, it becomes nearly impossible to support the infrastructure that makes modern life convenient. Internet service becomes spotty. Cell phone coverage disappears. Even basic utilities become expensive to maintain across such vast, sparsely populated areas. The story isn't entirely one of decline. Between 2010 and 2019, something unexpected happened in the northern Great Plains. The region actually experienced 8.3% population growth, exceeding the national average of 6.3%. For the first time in decades, it seemed like the Great Plains might be reversing its demographic slide. Oil drove this growth. The 5 fastest-growing counties in the northern Great Plains were all in North Dakota, all driven by the Bakken oil boom. McKenzie County became the fastest-growing county in the entire nation during this period. Williams, Mountrail, Stark, and Dunn counties followed close behind. This growth came with its own unique characteristics. These oil boom counties experienced extreme volatility, rapid growth at the beginning of the decade, population loss in the middle as oil prices crashed, then growth again as the industry recovered. It was a classic boom-bust cycle that highlighted the challenges of building sustainable communities in resource extraction economies. The demographic profile of this growth was telling too. The northern Great Plains attracted working-age males, particularly in the 35 to 39 age range, drawn by high-paying oil industry jobs. But the region continued to struggle with retaining families and building the kind of diverse, stable communities that support long-term growth. The few metropolitan areas in the Great Plains continued their steady expansion. Lincoln, Nebraska became the state's fastest-growing city, with metro area population growth of 11.8% from 2010 to 2020. Cities like Omaha, Denver, Kansas City, and Oklahoma City absorbed most of the region's population growth, leaving rural areas further behind. This concentration pattern reveals something profound about how Americans live in the 21st century. We're increasingly clustering in metropolitan areas that offer economic opportunities, cultural amenities, and social connections. The Great Plains metropolitan counties that are thriving tend to be home to major universities, state capitals, or significant industry hubs. What's particularly striking is how recent this transformation is in historical terms. Nearly 2/3 of northern Great Plains counties reached their highest populations between 1910 and 1930, over 90 years ago, and have been declining ever since. We're witnessing the reversal of more than a century of settlement patterns. The age structure of the remaining Great Plains population tells another part of the story. The region has a higher proportion of residents over 55 and under 14 compared to the national average, but a lower proportion of working-age adults. This creates its own challenges, as communities struggle to maintain economic vitality with an aging population and limited young adult retention. For many Great Plains communities, the question isn't how to grow, it's how to manage decline gracefully. Some towns have embraced their smaller size, focusing on quality of life for remaining residents. Others have tried to attract remote workers or retirees, seeking lower costs of living and wide-open spaces. The COVID-19 pandemic briefly sparked interest in rural living as remote work became more common. Some Great Plains communities saw modest population increases as people sought to escape crowded urban areas. Early data suggests this trend was largely temporary, with most areas returning to their previous demographic patterns as pandemic restrictions eased. Climate change adds another layer of complexity to the Great Plains population puzzle. The region faces increasing challenges from extreme weather, including more severe droughts, storms, and temperature fluctuations. These environmental pressures could accelerate outmigration from agricultural communities already struggling economically. There are also emerging opportunities. Renewable energy development, particularly wind power, has brought new investment to some Great Plains communities. The region's vast open spaces and consistent winds make it ideal for wind farms, creating new revenue streams for landowners and local governments. Technology infrastructure improvements could also change the equation. Better broadband access might enable more remote work opportunities, allowing people to live in the Great Plains while working for companies based anywhere. Some communities are making significant investments in fiber optic networks and digital infrastructure to attract this new economy. The Great Plains population story reflects broader changes in how Americans live and work. We've moved from a primarily agricultural economy to one based on services, technology, and knowledge work. We've shifted from small, distributed communities to large metropolitan areas that can support specialized industries and diverse cultural offerings. This transformation isn't unique to America. Rural population decline is happening across the developed world as people migrate to cities for opportunities and amenities. What makes the Great Plains unique is the sheer scale of the empty space created by this migration. The Great Plains faces a choice between managed decline and strategic reinvention. Some communities are finding success by focusing on their unique advantages: low cost of living, strong community connections, outdoor recreation opportunities, and proximity to natural resources. Others are struggling to maintain basic services as their populations dwindle. The region's future likely depends on its ability to adapt to new economic realities while preserving what makes it distinctive. The Great Plains may never again support the dense network of small farming communities that characterized it a century ago, but it could evolve into something different: a region of renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, and communities that offer an alternative to urban living for those who choose it. The demographic transformation of the Great Plains represents one of the most significant internal migrations in American history. It's a story of economic change, technological progress, and evolving preferences about how and where to live. Whether you see it as decline or evolution, the Great Plains continues to shape America's demographic destiny, one empty county at a time.